To our text this morning that is coming from Matthew chapter 16, 13 to 18. And today is our last sermon in our sermon series, 2020 Vision. And today's title is called a Multiplying Church. Multiplying Church. Matthew chapter 16, 13 to 18. I'll read the word. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do you say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." And he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, or Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's pray. Dear God, I just pray that you may open up our ears and our hearts. I pray that your words may sink deep and may sprout fruit in our lives. Lord, as we talk about what it means to be church or a multiplying church, I pray, O Lord, that you may convict us, O Lord, of only what is of yours, O Lord. And I pray that you may give us confidence as a church to be able to move forward. Lord, I thank you for your faithfulness just over the years and faithfulness even in our personal lives that have led us here. Lord, and we give you glory and thanks. Lord, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts right now will be holy and pleasing to you. And I pray that your words and your gospel will be preached and your spirit may work in our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You know, like I mentioned before, we're finally in our last sermon in our sermon series called 2020 Vision, and we've been talking about the values of our church that we started from the very beginning. And values are really things that really propped up and hold up the vision or the mission of the church. You know, they're kind of like the pillars that help the mission stay on focus. You know, for instance, if a mission is to go out and make disciples, the values are the things that, you know, help it to make it happen. And last week we talked about engaging in mission. And engaging in mission, we stated the church's mission, which is the mission of Grace Point North, is building a multiplying gospel-centered community that is faithful to the Great Commandments and the Great Commission. And to really put it simple, the Great Commandments is pretty much summed up as loving God with all of our hearts and all of our minds and all of our strength, and then loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. And then the Great Commission, as we learned last week, is to be a disciple and also to make disciples. And last week we talked about how missions is not a program. It's not something that we simply just check off the list and say, hey, we've done it. We've sent some people off and they've come back. They've accomplished something. Now it's done. No, but missions is more of a posture of life, a rhythm of life, a lifestyle that sprouts from the heart of love to God. And when we are growing as disciples, we start to invite others to do the same. So when someone asks you, what does your church do for missions? Simply say, hey, we're all on missions all the time. This is what we are. It happens in our daily walk. And today, let's focus on the word in our mission statement, multiplying, a multiplying gospel-centered community. Or what we say as our fifth E in our values, expand by planting churches. This means that rather than simply dreaming of growing ourselves, we seek also to be growing as a church by, one, helping other new churches being planted. We have supported some other church plants, and we hope to do some more this year. And also by reproducing new churches ourselves. And it occurred to me, you know, I've been thinking about this whole idea of multiplying for a while because, you know, I got to be totally honest, like, After going on this church plant thing, I was like, I don't know if I want to do it again, or why send off more people? There's a lot of sacrifice. But you know, there's a pattern of things in this world, kind of a phenomenon called reproducing. Almost by nature and design, it's by nature and design that God created us to reproduce. Animals reproduce, humans reproduce, and this is not only just done biologically, but it's also done socially and mentally, intellectually. This is why there's mothers and fathers, and this is why there's schools and teachers and professors. This is why we have academics and tutors, and this is the reason why we pay a lot of money for tuition, for the sake of something to be reproduced, something that is good being reproduced. And I thought about this. I mean, it's the same pattern that is found in the Christian life. As we're growing as disciples, we make disciples. We reproduce. We learn to pass down our blessings. As we mature and eat ourselves, Christ says to feed. And Christ challenges Peter to do that in our text last week. It's a pattern that we find in the Great Commission. But it's the same process, I believe, that exists for a church. As a church matures, as it grows, it should also reproduce. And we see this happening throughout the book of Acts. We see this happening in Christian history. Apostle Paul goes around and starts new churches wherever he goes. He develops leader. He creates a community. Churches reproduce. And this can be directly, kind of like Grace Point, where they sent off a few people to become just kind of the seeds to start a new church. Or it can be indirectly, where a pastor grows up in a church. He got groomed in a church. He gets trained in a church, and he goes out and starts another church. Or a group of people come from all different churches, and they start another church. So naturally, although churches might not make it a conscious goal, it does happen this way. There's a natural progression. And sometimes it happens even though they don't want it to happen. It's funny, in LA, there's a huge pattern that was pointed out to me, especially amongst the Korean American churches, that usually when a church got too big or too mature, there would be a lot of people that would grow up, a lot of leaders start to form, and those leaders start to fight with each other, and they split up, and two churches form. And then they say those things get big, those churches got big too, and they split again. And, they looked at this negatively, but he was like, have you ever thought of did you know that from that one church over there's 10 churches in LA? And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, that one came from this one, it split again, they come to get this. And it's like it almost happens almost naturally, right? But it wasn't their goal. And I start to see this too. I mean, even in the immigrant churches that I grew up in, for the most part, a church would grow. The next generation of children would grow up. There are cultural differences that make community life a little bit more difficult. That generation comes to age with the ability to lead and mature, but the leadership is too stacked. They don't have an opportunity to serve in that type of way. So the next generation of church members, they eventually become another church. In Philly, it's a little bit slower, but you go to LA, you see that everywhere. And sometimes it's viewed negatively. Oh, it's a church split, or sometimes it doesn't happen in the best way possible. But I wonder if it's just a natural flow of life that should be embraced. As you mature, we're called to multiply. And if you don't, there's either going to be more internal fighting or more potential leaders who are never able to grow up and mature, or there's like a failure to launch. See, reproduction and multiplication, whether that's in birthing like biologically or birthing spiritually, spreading the word and making more Christians, birthing also happens in the church, where you send off trained leaders and also pastors, and it becomes something of reproduction. It should be a part of a vision for God's kingdom. But of course, birthing and rearing does come with a lot of sacrifices. It's a part of life, isn't it? Birthing comes with a lot of sacrifices. But if you don't embrace it, a lot of times we don't grow or mature. Your spiritual growth happens when you seek to bless another person to help them grow. But whenever talking about starting new churches or planning new churches that comes up, and I remember starting about 4 years ago when all this was happening, I got the same question over and over again. They're like, Paul, doesn't America already have a lot of churches? Why not just go out and make them stronger? So, during that time, I remember going back and looking at the numbers because, there's a lot of church planting movements. They have numbers coming out of everywhere. And I'm not naive in thinking that surveys are perfect, but it does give us some helpful data. They say, although there are many who affiliate themselves with the Christian faith, like they check it off in on data polls and stuff like that, in reality, there are about over 200 million non-church going people in America, which makes America actually one of the fourth largest unchurched nations in the world. And this is because statistically only 22% of America go to a place called church. And when they check it off saying they go regularly, that means they go maybe once a month or something like that, but they still check it 22%. So even if all the existing churches were filled and no seats remained, there still would be a need for more churches. Not to mention those numbers who affiliate themselves with a Christian faith, with Christian faith at all. That surveys say that it went down about 12% over the past decade. From 2009 to 2019, those that describe themselves as non-affiliated with any type of religion, particularly amongst the young generation, it grew. In addition, at least 65% of the churches are either plateaued or declining. It's not unusual to walk into a church these days that has hundreds of seating and only a small percentage of them are filled. And amongst those that are filled, they're like all in their 60s and 70s, all white hairs. Many churches close their doors. The stats are all over the place on this, actually. Conservatively, they say about 4,000 churches close every year, while others say it's closer to 6,000 or 10,000. And I was just like, some numbers are so off. Like, I don't know what's real. But it actually shows us that there is a trend of some sort. Some people say, shouldn't we work on existing ones? There are a lot of people who do and who have been doing that for the past decades. But so many practitioners have come and said, those who have been on the field, they say, hey, old churches change so slow that once you're set in a certain way for so long, it doesn't change easily. And it takes a tremendous amount of time to get things changing just because of the politics, sometimes because of man-made traditions or And this is to say, like, after a time where a church has existed for so long, and maybe it will be like that in like 20 years too, the chances of them bringing anybody new in dwindles significantly. And some have concluded that we can either wait for things to turn around, lose an entire generation, or we got to go out and start new churches. So over the past decade or more, there's been a huge search for new churches to start. And they found that new churches were 5 to 10 times more likely to reach out either to the unchurched or the dechurched people, which basically are people either that never went to church or those who went in the past but have left it for a long time. And a lot of movements have been growing after they're seeing these types of effects. They're like, wow, this is an effective way. Many churches have come to realize that multiplication is necessary. Maybe you might not see it right now, but it certainly will later, at least for us. There are only a few churches that actually go past surviving a generation. Most churches die within a generation. Therefore, they should be focused on birthing others rather than holding on to precious resources. And I was like, man, that's why it's got to be there from the beginning, you know? My gosh, my prayer is that our church would be dreaming of multiplying rather than, building and hoarding our own type of church. And in turn, it's interesting, they say that research has found that whenever new churches are started, it almost becomes a wake-up call to the old churches, where now they're motivated. They realize they have to revitalize. I mean, it's a win-win across the board. And hearing these stats, you begin to wonder, how can you not have the goal of seeing new churches come up? It's not really about, do we need more churches? Because the numbers certainly say that we do. But it's a matter of whether or not people or churches are willing to do it. The question is, are you up for the task? There is a need for more communities that would do what churches do. Help people encounter the gospel. Help people exist in community. Help people equip for ministry. Help people engage in the mission so that we can expand by not growing ourselves, but by multiplying. And you have to think, let me ask you guys a question. And even in your own life, like you as an individual, like, would you want your legacy for you to be like the most successful person, grown up, all mature and everything, but it stops with you? It's not planted into the next generation. Even when we think about our families, when we think about our legacy, we're like, no, we want to multiply. We want to pass it down. And it has to be the same for the church family. Over this week, while writing this message, and reading our text this morning, I was just like, man, what text do you do for planning churches? And I started to look at this text because I remember preaching on it back in the day. But it says, I will build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Oh my gosh, and after Christ says this, man, the church goes off like generations and generations. They kept planting new churches. And, reading this, I will build my church. As a church, we're not a church plant anymore, but I can't believe it's already been 3 years and 5 months since we've been worshiping in this building, and 7 months since we became an independent church. Before here, our launch team was meeting in the living rooms of people's houses. I was like, Mom, can I bring people to your house? I didn't have a house yet, and, we're meeting in my mom's living room. But what started off as a simple vision at Grace Point Church, who has blessed us so much for us to be here, it eventually became a small group that met met weekly every Sunday night. And I still remember going to those meetings as just a young church planter that just came from LA, having no clue what it meant to start a new church. And I bet you, a few people that joined our small groups, they left immediately. Like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. It was a fun kind of process. And I remember those moments I was wondering, like, hey, did I make the right decision? I should just go to a church that's set up already. I mean, a church that could give a good salary. One denomination actually reached out to me and said, if you start with us, we'll give you everything, full pension and everything. But I couldn't join them because I didn't agree with their faith statement. I didn't think they were faithful to the gospel. I remember praying over our doubts, seeing my own deficiencies, and prayed over and over again. But I remember, looking back, those are like moments that were vitamins to my soul, because it drove me to prayer. At that time, I've reached out to a bunch of people, other people in ministry, to see if they'd be willing to join me. And that's when I found out I wasn't a real good salesman either, because I'd go up to them and be like, yo, dude, we might fail, but you want to join? All of them were like, no, we're good, we're good. I don't want that in my resume, And I was like, gee, thanks. But you know what? What God has showed me, that God, He really, really answers prayers, because little by little, people would join. Sometimes friends would join just because they felt bad. Like, damn, we can't just leave him to drown by himself. So, they came around, and you guys really did take a leap of faith, because I had more bad testimonies at that point than good ones. But I don't mean to talk about this journey as if it's my own. It's not. Church is not centered around any one person, but it's each person that comes together to worship and support it. And we've really came a long way. Even with so many things that we need to work on and grow on, we've grown through the process. Each person who comes here is to serve. Each person that comes to call this church their home. Each person who just even shows up once in a while, or even if today's your first day, our church doesn't take anything for granted, because we really believe that God sends each person. And I want to thank you guys for being here, and thank you for being a blessing to everyone here. And I want to thank God from the bottom of my heart that He's given me an opportunity to do church with you all. And can we just turn to our neighbors? I mean, it's a little awkward, but can you say, I'm blessed because of you? I mean, each person is a blessing, And this passage that I'm preaching on today is pretty familiar to me, because I've actually preached on it 3.5 years ago during our soft launch, when there's only about a handful of people in this room, when talking about church planting and how we wanted to make this one of the values of our church. Because this passage actually knocks out all fear when it comes to church. And oftentimes, church planting is never pursued because of the fear that it might not work. I still remember all the negative voices, even at Grace Point Central, when we said, oh, they're going to send the group up. They're like, yo, we're going to lose friendships. Like, what's going to happen to our budget? Like, who is this guy Paul? Why is he taking people? Like, what's going on? And, I think many churches will look at the statistics that I just talked to you about. Church membership declining, people identify as Christians declining, church attendance declining. In the world becoming more secular, you look at the news, you feel like everything's falling apart. And you're like, maybe we should go into survival mode. But this passage is a real reminder that our confidence in doing anything doesn't come from ourselves, doesn't come from what's going on around or viewing what's happening, but it comes from above. And let's check this out. When we look at our text, right, we see that the disciples were also facing discouraging statistics when thinking about beginning the church. This is when the church is about to be birthed. Check this out. When Jesus asks, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Jesus is actually referring to himself right now, the Son of Man. It's a poetic reference that was used in the past when talking about all the prophecies that lead up to Jesus. But when he goes to them and says, hey, who do people say I am? Most people don't have a clue. Not a clue. They may have heard the name of Jesus. There were thousands of people that followed after him. Thousands, some say up to 20,000 people began to follow him. They asked for food. He had to feed all those people. But the disciples, they simply respond by saying, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others say Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets. And you got to imagine, it's like, they're just basically naming a bunch of famous people. They're like, yeah, I think he's like that leader or that leader. They say you're kind of like that. In other words, they're saying that Jesus was just another guy, a good leader with a strong message, just another good guy. And on the surface, it sounds pretty nice, but you got to realize that the disciples gave up their entire lives to follow this guy. They left their families, they left their careers. And you got to realize right now that this is kind of a discouraging moment. A little group of 12 people, and that was it. They expected bigger followings. At some point when they joined and they were excited, there were thousands of people, but now there's only 12. And they realized that the crowds were only there for some free food or some free miracles. But at the end, only 12. I mean, can you imagine the credibility of a religion that's only 12 people? I mean, if there was only 12 people here after 3.5 years, I'd be really discouraged. I'd probably sit down on the floor like, guys, I think it's time to call it quits. And it's funny because these guys had retreated all the way north to the farthest northern part of the land of Israel, right up to the border. This is away from all the crowds, away from all the big cities. They're in a place called Caesarea Philippi, which is a countryside at the foot of the mountains. And they're realizing that they're the only ones that are following, while the rest of the world is looking at Jesus as another dude. Now imagine that the disciples are kind of discouraged. I mean, wouldn't you? Feeling like everything that they've been doing up to this point might have been a waste. Maybe they were wrong about Jesus. In fact, it's almost certain that most of them were expecting more out of Jesus. In fact, the entire Jewish community was waiting for a political leader that would come to be their king. I mean, they were sick of being ruled by the Romans. They were sick of being ruled by so many other people, even before the Romans. They're like, finally, we need somebody to come back and bring us our independence. We got to grow. We need a political leader. But now they're just hanging in the countryside. Jesus is beginning to look like the rest of the leaders that have come in the past and gone. Is this mission worth it? In fact, we know that the Pharisees at this point were probably already plotting to kill Jesus. And have you ever thought about anything this way? Is this task worth it? Am I toiling for a purpose? Is who I am following worth it right now? Is he the truth? Imagine going all in a company or a product, and you threw all your life savings because somebody had a good pitch, said you would make millions if you invested. You sold everything. You went all in, but you're seeing no returns. In fact, you see that line keep going down and down. Church planting, starting something new, could definitely feel this way. Why do it when no one cares about church anyway? In fact, they say the number one reason why people don't like Christianity in general is because of the church. They don't like Christ because of the church. They dislike Christ because of the church. And I'm just like, man, why am I going all out in church? These guys, they were all Jewish. They probably thought, let's just stick to our group. Let's go back to the temple. Let's stick to the synagogues. They follow the rules. They keep it safe. Why reach out? And in that moment, Jesus asks the question. He asked them, hey, forget about everybody else. Who do you say I am? Don't worry about the people around or the people that don't follow. Do you yourself know who I am? And this is what really matters at the end of the day. Let me ask you guys, who do you say Jesus is? Who do you say he is? What do you say to this question? If your kid came up to you and said, hey, Mom, Dad, who's Jesus? How are you going to respond? I think most of the world would be like, he's a good guy. He's a good religious leader. Follow his example, He's kind of like Elijah. He's kind of like John the Baptist, Who do you say he is? You say, he's just, we got to follow. He's just a good guy, follow him, And I realize, a person's confession is so powerful, and I think we take that for granted. If Jesus is just another guy, another religion amongst the others, then what's the point of following him at all? That definition is not going to save you. That person can't do anything for you. A man can't save another person, just like a guy who can't swim can't save a guy that's drowning in the ocean. Can't. See, the confession of who Jesus is the key to life. And I'm so glad that Peter actually got this one right. He got a lot of other things wrong, but he got this one right, and that's why he became one of the pillars or the rocks of the church. Peter simply says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, and this confession makes all the difference. It sounds so simple, right? You are the Christ. What does Christ mean? Christ means the anointed one, the Messiah that people have been waiting for, meaning the person who was promised from the beginning to come and save and bring salvation to his people. He's a Savior. But not more than that, he's also the Son of the living God, meaning God himself, the second person of the Trinity. a God who came down into a world to become a human. He is the Son of God who actually has the power to save. He's basically saying, hey, Jesus, you're my Lord and Savior. It's a person who not only saved me, but also who rules over me. He's not only a person who hears my prayers, fulfills my hope, but he is a God who has has everything in his hands, who I'm called to worship. He is my King. Let me ask you a simple question. Who is Jesus? This confession is the most important one of your life. And I hope it's the same confession that Peter has. Jesus is saying to you, and if this is your confession, he's saying to you, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, or blessed are you, James, Esther, Mike, blessed are you. For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. There are two promises in this that give us hope for the future of the church. One, it basically states, one, salvation is in the hands of God, not in the hands of man. And two, therefore the church is in the hands of God, not in the hands of man. See, the most comforting thing is Peter is representing us, those in the church, those who confess Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And see, Peter, in the Greek, it means Petros, a masculine noun. It's a word that means rock, or actually, if you actually look at what it actually means, it means pebble or a little stone. So Jesus is kind of making a play on words here. He's saying, Peter, you're a pebble. It's not so flattering, right? You're a pebble. You're a pebble. But he follows up saying, it's not just on you. In fact, I'm not going to build my church just on you. But look at the next sentence. He says, and on this rock, he actually uses a different type of now. This is a feminine noun, Petra in Greek, which means bedrock. He's saying, I'm going to build my church on a bedrock. You on a pebble, and on a bedrock, I'm going to build it. Peter is a pebble, and Jesus knew that. He knew Peter. Peter means, Peter's name was actually given by Jesus. But if you actually think about it, Peter is the last person who you think would be steady and sturdy in faith. I mean, we learned this last week, right? He wavered in faith all the time, rejected Christ 3 times. He's the dude that couldn't even say, I love you to Jesus in the fullest way. Peter was not faithful or even strong, but he called him a rock. Why? Because he knew that he would be standing on the bedrock, who is Christ. You are a pebble, and I will build my church through you, but it's going to be on the bedrock of who I am. But the next, phrase is really telling. This was not revealed to you by anything other than God. Do you know that faith is in the hands of God? And what does that mean? Sometimes we think that faith is about what I can do or how I came to faith. I was so smart that I gripped onto these truths and now I'm saved. I'm so smart compared to a lot of other people. Or faith is about how good I am or how strong my convictions and confessions are. And I thought faith was about how strong I was. But you know what happens when faith relies on that? It goes up and down like a roller coaster. One moment you're going to have it. Another moment you're going to say, I lost it. And I think we'll eventually come to the point like we did with Peter and say, God, I don't really love you because it's on me, But when we say that faith is in the hands of God, he's saying, no, it's not because of your choice, because it's because of my choice for you. It's a gift I'm giving to you. For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. This is saying that faith is not something you grab, but faith is something that grabs you. And I felt this so many times in my own life, Sometimes I wake up in the morning, and faith was really on me. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and say, why am I pastor? Why am I getting up on Sunday morning? What am I doing right now? God, you're not real. And then the next one I was like, sorry, God. I get this little feeling inside of me. And I've begun to recognize that feeling inside of me, that emptiness or that drawing, I realize that's a gift from God. It doesn't come to everybody. Faith is a gift from God. That feeling is a gift from God. And has nothing to do with what you have earned. Guys, faith is not earned. We're not Christians because we're smarter to accept a story or a confession. I say this over and over again, Faith is received, it's not achieved, as it was with Peter. And faith is not something that we possess as if it's our own, but faith is simply the recognition of who possesses you, who has you in their own hands. And I think many young parents can feel this gospel truth in a whole new way, right? Just like a child doesn't earn their birth in the world, rather they're birthed out of love. It's the same for each person who comes to faith. They're birthed out of love. It is a God who gives belief. Therefore, there is nothing that man can boast about. There's more. If faith is in the hands of God, then so is the church. Christ says, I will build my church, and not even the gates of hell will prevail against it. Not even discouragement will prevail against it. Not even changing times will prevail against it. Not even demons or criticisms or hate or persecution will prevail against it. If the church is not a building, but it's people, a gathering of those who confess this confession, then it's for certain that the church is also built by the hands of God. And this confession changes how you view everything. It really does. And this word, I think this is a word that God is giving to us even as a young church, right? Because this phrase should both humble us and also encourage us. It should humble us because this church is not something any of us built on our own. It should humble us because ultimately it is God who moves in the heart of people and a God who builds his church and a God who can also take it away. It's very, very humbling, but it's also encouraging because we learn that despite scary statistics, despite our failure and our shortcomings in many ways, Christ says, I'm going to build my church. And it gives us confidence to be a part of that work. And gosh, how real that is. God has built his church by the sacrifice of so many, not one people. You know where God built his church? God built his church by the sacrifice of many of your parents. Parents who have made it a mission to disciple the faith that you have in you. They drag you to church. They prayed for you. Maybe that's why some of you guys are here. God has built this church through the sacrifice and love of so many other churches who invested in many people in this room, including myself, the youth groups that we were a part of, the VBS you attended as a kid, the pastors and all the teachers who shaped your faith walk. Apart from this church, and even those of you guys that might be new to the faith, your friends who dragged you here, said that there was a kids event and you ended up staying or something like that, or maybe a hard time you faced that got you back to the church. All those series of events are in the hands of God and how God works in mysterious ways. The gospel seeds that have been planted all over have brought us together to form a church. And your testimonies witness that God is building the church. More and more I realize, as somebody in ministry, that not only is faith received and not achieved, but so is ministry. Ministry is received, it's not achieved. It's not a man-made thing. It's a God-given thing. Therefore, there's no need to fear. The church was built on the death and resurrection of Christ. After Jesus died, his apostles went out and preached the message. They died for it, almost all of them. The church was built on the back of those martyrs. From Israel, the church went to the Greek world and to Rome, from Rome to the rest of Europe, from Europe to America, and from America and other parts of the world to various other parts of the world. Missionaries all around the world are still planting churches today. And it's spreading in places like Africa and China like wildfire. Jesus says he's going to build the church. And no one person does this alone. No one church does this alone. I'm going to ask the praise team to come up. God says that he will build his church. And he's building his church through all the little pebbles that confess that he is the Lord and Savior, because he is the bedrock that will hold it all together. All throughout the New Testament, after Jesus died and resurrects, he gives this command to reach the nations. And apostles and disciples go out and they plant churches. Notice that they didn't just spread the gospel. They didn't just go out and share a message. They planted churches. We often think that sharing our faith is simply getting a decision out of somebody, but it's not. Spreading the gospel and walking with them is really doing life together. It's walking with it. It's a community that continually preaches Christ, a community that grows together. It's a church made up of disciples who live on mission. And this is what we hope to do as we dream to one day plant churches. We don't want to fight the natural design that God has built for the church. It's one of our goals. I was talking with even with our elders, where he was like, hey, my friend is planting a church. Can we support him? I was like, yeah. Make it a goal to financially give to the work of church planting, not hoarding it for ourselves. Rather than dreaming of building a tower of a church or a tower of Babel. If you guys actually read Genesis 11, God says, go scatter, but they just build a tower. We pray that we'll instead scatter to send out good leaders and good members as we mature. And when God gives us that opportunity to really birth another church, I pray that we may respond to it when that time comes. And in that moment, when we feel like the disciples, discouraged and hiding, may remember who is the giver of salvation and the builder of the church. And may that give us confidence. Let's take a moment just to pray. And in a moment, we're going to go into a time of taking communion as well. Let's take just a moment just to pray. As we think about the church and think about this whole idea of multiplying, that God may give us a heart and a conviction to be a church or be individuals that multiply, that aren't just bless themselves, but go on to share that blessing, to pass that on. I pray that our church may be the same. Let's take a moment, and then we're going to go into a time of communion.